The highway still roared behind him, trucks screaming past in an endless stream, their horns blaring like thunder. Dust clung to Rocky's fur. His breath came fast, but he had made it. He had crossed the storm of steel and wheels, and somehow he had survived. On the shoulder, the truck sat idle, its rear tire blown and sagging against the asphalt. The driver, a man in his late 50s with oil-stained hands and the kind of weariness etched into his face that only years on the road could carve, knelt beside the wheel. He muttered curses under his breath, rummaging through his toolbox, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. When he finally looked up, his eyes went wide. There, just a few yards away, stood the dog. Rocky's legs trembled from the sprint, his chest still heaving, but his black eyes glowed with something fierce, something unbroken. His tail gave a single cautious sweep, then stilled. He didn't growl, he didn't run. He simply stood there, steady and silent, as if waiting for the man to decide. The driver wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "You're one crazy mutt. Ran across all that traffic just to get here." Rocky stepped forward once, then paused. Paws planted, ears high. He didn't beg, didn't cower. He only watched with a sharpness that unsettled the man, as if this wasn't an ordinary dog at all, but something more. The driver shook his head, turning back to his work. "Blown tire. Seen worse. Just need to swap it and roll on." Rocky's nose twitched. The wind carried it to him, sharp, bitter, dangerous. He padded in a slow circle around the truck, sniffing the air until his body stiffened. Beneath the chassis, dark streaks glistened on the pavement. Oil. It dripped steady, each drop hissing faintly on the hot road. Rocky barked loud and urgent. His claws scraped at the asphalt, paws stamping as if to point the man's eyes toward the danger. The driver jolted upright, startled. "What's got into you? Quiet down, boy. I've got enough trouble already." But Rocky wouldn't stop. He barked again, sharper, backing up, then darting forward, nose aimed at the spreading stain. A low growl rumbled from his chest, insistent, unrelenting. The man frowned, set down his wrench, and crouched to peer beneath the truck. A second later, his whole body went rigid. "Son of a—" He shot to his feet, running a hand through his graying hair. "That's a damn oil leak. If I'd pulled back on the highway like this, I could have fried the whole engine. Maybe worse, gone up in flames." He stared at the dog, astonishment etched deep into his tired features. Gratitude softened the edges of his voice. "You caught that? You little stray. You just saved my rig. Maybe even my hide." Rocky lowered onto his haunches, tail brushing the gravel. His eyes stayed fixed on the man, not pleading, not asking, only steady, like he was waiting for a verdict. The driver chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "Hell, you're sharper than half the rookies I've trained. Smarter, too." He hesitated, his gaze lingering on the dog. Then almost reluctantly, he patted the metal step beneath the open cab door. "Come on, boy. You want in? You want the road? All right, then. You've earned it." Rocky tilted his head. The thunder of the highway still shook the air around them. Diesel smoke stung his nose, but his eyes locked on that open door. Slowly, cautiously, he padded forward. One paw rose, then pressed against the metal step. He froze, ears flicking back, glancing up at the man. The driver's weathered face softened into a weary grin. "That's it. You can trust me. Life out here's nothing but long miles and rough roads, but something tells me you were made for it." Rocky placed his second paw on the step. He lingered there halfway between the gravel and the cab, trembling with a hesitation that wasn't fear. It was choice. Then with a sudden bound of resolve, he pushed upward, landing inside the truck. He settled on the rubber floor mat chest, still rising and falling with heavy breaths, but his eyes bright alive, fixed on the windshield and the road beyond. The driver bent to patch the leak, swapped the tire, and at last climbed into the seat. The key turned, the engine roared, the whole rig shuddered as if waking from sleep. He glanced down at the dog, sitting like a sentinel at his feet. "You're something else, buddy," the man said with a laugh. "Guess it's just you and me now. Two wanderers chasing miles together." Rocky's tail thumped once against the mat. He didn't know the words, but he felt the meaning: trust, acceptance, belonging. Outside, the highway stretched wide, an endless dawn rising higher into day. The man shifted gears, the truck groaned forward, and Rocky leaned into the motion. His eyes stayed locked on the horizon, steady and unflinching. He had crossed the storm. He had found a partner. And now, for the first time, he wasn't just watching the road. He was riding it. Since the day Rocky leapt into the truck, his life had changed. No longer wandering alleys or hiding in forests, he now traveled with two men who lived by the highway. The older driver was Henry in his late 50s, calm and steady, his voice roughened by years of smoke and diesel. His partner was Mark, early 30s, restless, quick with a laugh, quick with a joke. Together they hauled freight from cities to small towns, past wooden barns and wide fields down to ports where cranes lifted containers like toys. And Rocky, once astray, became their shadow. He pressed his nose to the glass ears flapping in the wind, eyes shining as the world rolled past. At every stop he bounded out, sniffing grass, chasing scents of soil and wood smoke, always returning with his tail wagging like he had found treasure. For weeks, life felt free. But freedom on the road carried risks. One evening, Henry got the order a northern delivery. The only route cut through a mountain pass, a narrow ribbon of asphalt clinging to the cliffs. The night before, rain hammered the peaks. Water poured down in torrents, loosening roots, turning the slopes to mud. From their motel window, Mark watched the storm fade, grinning. Tomorrow will be fine. Roads dry quick. Henry lit a cigarette, nodding. Radio says no closures. We'll make it. On the floor by the bed, Rocky stirred. His ears twitched at the thunder's echo, his nose full of the smell of wet earth, thick, unstable. He couldn't name it, but instinct told him danger had not passed. Morning came clear and bright. The truck climbed the winding road, gears grinding, engine straining against gravity. Music played low on the radio, Mark drumming the dash. Henry focused on the wheel. Rocky sat upright, eyes fixed on the cliffside above them. He smelled it first. Damp soil shifting, roots tearing. His body stiffened. He barked once sharp, then again louder. "Hey, buddy!" Mark chuckled, glancing over. "What's wrong? Don't like the tune?" Rocky barked harder, paws against the glass tail rigid. His gaze never left the mountain. Henry turned the volume down, his brow furrowed. Wait. He's serious. Pebbles rattled down the slope. Branches shook though no wind blew. Then a sound that chilled the air, the crack of roots snapping free. "God Almighty," Henry breathed. Landslide. Even as he spoke, a massive tree tilted the earth, crumbling beneath its roots. Soil tumbled down, scattering across the road. "Hold on," Henry roared. He slammed the accelerator. The truck growled, tires spitting mud. Mark gripped the dash, knuckles white. Behind them, the mountain split open. Stones clattered, a boulder smashed onto the road, bursting into shards. Dust billowed thick, choking the air. Rocky braced himself, claws digging into the mat, barking wildly as if to drive the truck forward. Henry's face was iron. "Come on, hold together." Another tree crashed down. A river of mud and stone surged after the trailer, chasing them around the bend. "Go, go!" Mark shouted, terror cracking his voice. The engine screamed cargo, groaning in the trailer. Then came the worst. 3 enormous boulders broke free, tumbling in terrible arcs. They slammed onto the road just seconds behind, exploding into fragments, rolling, grinding, then plunging into the abyss below. The earth shook. For a moment the cab was nothing but noise, stone against stone, wood snapping, the howl of collapse. Then silence. Henry eased off the pedal, breath ragged. He pulled onto a wider patch of ground, hands trembling on the wheel. Mark leaned back, sweat streaking his face, laughter breaking out shaky and thin. That was too close. Both men turned to Rocky. He stood tall on the seat, fur-bristled chest heaving, eyes glowing fierce in the dusty light. Henry exhaled, voice low with awe. "If not for him." Mark reached over, ruffling Rocky's ears, his grin softer now, almost tender. "Buddy, you saved us. You're not just along for the ride anymore. You're family." Rocky lowered himself slowly, tail thumping, once body finally relaxing. He didn't understand the words, but he felt them, the warmth, the bond, the truth. The three sat in the quiet cab, the mountain looming behind the road, stretching ahead. The danger had passed, but something stronger had taken its place. Trust. From that day, Rocky was no longer a stray who stumbled onto the highway. He was their guardian, their compass, their partner. and together they rolled forward deeper into the miles bound, not just by duty, but by the bond forged under falling stone. That night, after unloading their cargo in the small mountain town, the three of them checked into a modest roadside inn. The hum of the engine was gone, but the tension of the day still lingered like a shadow that refused to lift. Mark sat on the edge of his bed phone pressed to his ear. He tried to laugh as he spoke, but his hands shook slightly, and every so often his eyes dropped to Rocky curled at his feet. "You wouldn't believe it," he said, forcing a grin into his voice. "We almost got buried alive up there. If it hadn't been for Rocky, I don't think I'd be talking to you right now." On the other end, his girlfriend gasped, her voice breaking with worry. "Mark, you scare me with stories like that. I told you driving those mountain roads is like gambling with fate. Maybe it's time you come here. I want you to meet my family. Bring Henry, bring Rocky. My parents would love to see you with them." Mark's laugh this time was genuine, the kind that finally eased the weight pressing down on his chest. He glanced at Rocky, who lifted his head, dark eyes catching the dim yellow light. "Hear that, buddy? She wants me to bring you home. You're part of the package now." Rocky tilted his head, ears twitching, tail brushing the blanket in a slow, steady rhythm. By the window, Henry sat with a steaming cup of coffee, his weathered face half lit by the lamp, half in shadow. He had listened quietly through it all. At last he gave a low chuckle. "Go on," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "After a day like this, a home-cooked meal and a roof that doesn't rattle with every curve sounds just right. Besides, seeing her family might do you good, Mark. Remind you the world's more than highways and cargo." Mark leaned back, rubbing both hands across his face. He was still pale from the memory of falling stone, but relief flickered in his eyes. "You're right. We all need a break. Let's do it. Henry, Rocky, tomorrow we head to her place. Think of it as our reward for making it out." Rocky gave a short bark, casting his vote. His tail thumped once, firm and sure. Henry smiled, shaking his head. "Guess that settles it. 3-0." The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes with a plan, with the promise of something warm ahead. The mountain storm was behind them, and in its place rose the thought of laughter around a dinner table of family of a night without danger at the door. Rocky lowered his head onto Mark's leg, his breathing deep and steady. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the shift, the way fear had loosened, replaced by hope. Tomorrow they would drive again. Not toward another load, not just another job, but toward something personal, something human. And Rocky, once astray, lost in the wild, would ride with them, not just a passenger, but part of a family heading home. The truck rolled smoothly down the highway, its tires humming a steady rhythm on the pavement. Inside the cab, Mark was practically glowing. He had been talking for miles, his words tumbling out like water over rocks. "She says her mom makes the best roast chicken I'll ever taste." He grinned, waving his phone for emphasis. "And her dad, tough-looking guy, but soft heart. She swears he'll like me once he sees I can carry a real conversation. And get this, she already told them about Rocky. They can't wait to meet him." Henry chuckled, one hand steady on the wheel. "Relax, kid. You'll be fine. Show up with a dog like Rocky, they'll love you twice over. He's more of a hero than either of us." Mark leaned down, ruffling the fur between Rocky's ears. "Hear that, buddy? You're my secret weapon. Don't let me down." Rocky stirred, lifting his head for a moment. His dark eyes blinked slowly, catching Mark's excitement. He gave a quiet sigh, wagged his tail once, then curled back into a ball. The steady rumble of the truck lulled him back into sleep. The road stretched long and easy. Mountains thinned into valleys, the air soft with the scent of wet earth after rain. The cab filled with laughter and stories, Mark recalling the first time he met his girlfriend Henry, tossing in the occasional dry remark that made both men chuckle. But then the truck veered off the main highway, following a narrower road that wound into a green valley. The fields pressed closer. Wooden fences leaned with age, and thin curls of smoke rose from scattered chimneys. Rocky snapped awake. His head shot up, ears stiff, body rigid. His nose pressed hard against the glass, breath quickening. His eyes darted from one side of the road to the other, wide and unblinking. Mark glanced down in surprise. "Whoa, buddy, what's got into you?" Rocky whined, deep in his throat, tail lashing. Every muscle trembled with recognition. The fields, the hedgerows, the dirt path curving ahead, it was all familiar in a way too deep for memory alone. He barked once, sharp and ringing. Henry's eyes narrowed as he checked the mirrors. He knows this place. Mark blinked, startled. Knows it. What do you mean? Rocky barked again, louder this time, claws scraping the door. His tail whipped like a whip, cracking the air. He turned his head toward Mark, whining urgently, then pressed his nose to the window again, desperate not to lose what lay beyond. Henry's voice dropped low, thoughtful. This valley, it's near where the old man lived. Folks said he once took in a stray. Maybe that stray was Rocky. Mark leaned back, stunned. You're saying this could be where he came from? Rocky's answer was in his body. His ears quivered, his eyes gleamed wet in the dim light, and his tail thumped in furious bursts against the seat. Bark after bark burst from his chest, not warning, not fear, but something rawer. Recognition. The cab seemed to vibrate with his energy. Mark laughed nervously, his voice shaking. I've never seen him like this. Like he belongs here. Henry's hands tightened on the wheel as he guided the truck down the narrow lane. Not just belongs. He remembers. And memories like that, those cut deep. Outside the village revealed itself, ivy climbing old fences, a signpost faded by years of rain, chickens scattering as the truck rumbled past. And Rocky, eyes blazing, tail hammering the seat, barked with joy that shook the whole cab. Mark pressed a hand against Rocky's side, feeling the tremors in his muscles. Easy, buddy, easy. We'll stop soon. We'll find out what's got you so worked up. Rocky pressed his nose to the glass again, fogging the window with his breath. His tail never stopped beating like a drum, his eyes shining not just with joy but with longing. The truck rolled deeper into the valley, carrying them toward the village. And for Rocky, every scent, every turn, every shadow felt like a door creaking open, not just into memory but into the life he had once lost. The truck slowed to a stop at the edge of the village, brakes sighing as Henry eased it onto the gravel shoulder. The sun was sinking low, painting the valley in gold. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the air smelled of wood-damp earth and chickens scratching in the yards. Mark hopped down first, stretching his legs. Henry followed more slowly, rubbing the ache from his back after the long drive. Buddy jumped out, last landing light on his paws. He froze immediately. His ears shot up, his nose quivered, and his dark eyes widened at the sight before him. The lane was lined with wooden fences sagging a little with age, the same hedgerows that had once guided his paws when he was younger, hungrier, lonelier. The scents rushed at him all at once, burnt wood straw, the musk of livestock, and something deeper etched into memory. From a nearby yard, a young woman came running, Mark's girlfriend. She had been waiting, eyes bright with excitement, ready to throw her arms around him, but she stopped short. Her gaze locked not on Mark, but on the dog at his side. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her voice trembled. "Buddy! Is that you, Buddy?" Buddy barked once, sharp and joyous, his tail whipping the air like a banner. She dropped to her knees in the dirt and opened her arms. Buddy bounded forward, nearly knocking her over as she wrapped her arms tight around his neck. His body shook with excitement, wine spilling from his throat as if years of longing had burst at once. Mark blinked, stunned. He threw his hands in the air. "Hey, your boyfriend is standing right here. Don't I get a hug?" The villagers who had gathered nearby burst into laughter, their voices rolling down the lane. But the moment carried on without him. The sound of barking rippled through the valley, first one dog, then another, until the chorus echoed from every corner. Deep, triumphant barks, not of alarm, but of recognition. It was as if the whole valley announced in one voice the leader who once drove away the wolves had returned. People stepped from their homes, eyes wide, as they saw the dog pressed against the young woman's embrace. Murmurs spread like fire through dry grass. "It's Buddy. He's back. The old man's dog. The one who saved our flocks." Mark shifted uneasily, scratching his head. He had pictured himself as the center of attention, the brave trucker bringing his girl and his dog into town. Instead, he found himself forgotten, standing in the shadow of his own companion. Henry caught the look, a sly grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Looks like you're not the star tonight, kid," he muttered. Mark groaned, half embarrassed, half amused. "Figures. I risked my life on that mountain pass and he steals the show with one bark." But deep down, Even he couldn't help smiling. That evening, Henry and Mark sat at the family's table. Her parents welcomed them warmly, serving roasted chicken potatoes and bread still warm from the oven. They ate well-shared stories and were treated as honored guests. But Buddy, he belonged to everyone. Outside the square, filled with children tugging at his ears, elders reaching to stroke his head, neighbors pressing bowls of broth and scraps of meat into his path. They told stories of the night he had stood against the wolves, voices rising with pride as though he were a soldier home from war. He stood right there, an old man recounted, pointing toward the ridge, growling at the alpha wolf. Never saw courage like that in an animal. The children wrapped their arms around his neck, giggling. Buddy's tail wagged hard, his eyes bright as if he understood every word. From the window, Mark could hear the laughter and barking echoing through the night. He shook his head with a wry smile. I thought this was supposed to be my night, he muttered. Henry raised his cup, grin wide. Kid, tonight belongs to Buddy. You've got yourself a girlfriend, but he's got himself an entire village. Mark chuckled, watching Buddy prance through the torchlit square tail high, surrounded by cheering children and smiling faces. His frustration melted away, replaced with something warmer. Maybe it wasn't so bad to share the spotlight after all. Outside under the stars, Buddy the stray, once abandoned in the forest, was home again. Not just a guest, not just a dog, but a legend returned. Morning broke gently over the valley, a thin veil of mist clinging to the fields. The village stirred with the crow of roosters, the faint smell of wood smoke curling into the air. But Buddy was not at the house where Mark and Henry slept. He had slipped away at dawn, paws carrying him down the dirt road with a strange urgency, as if his heart already knew where it needed to go. The path wound between sagging fences and grass gone wild until a small wooden cabin came into view. Weathered now, its paint had faded to gray weeds clung to the porch steps and dust lined the edges of the closed door. It was the cabin he remembered. Buddy stopped at the steps, his chest rising and falling, his ears pricked forward, tail low, trembling. Then he barked, not in warning, not in play, but with the raw voice of longing. He pawed at the door, whining, pressing his nose against the wood as if sheer will might make it open. But no footsteps came, no gentle voice. No hand reached out. Across the fence line, an old farmer paused, leading a cow along the field. He set his bucket down, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the dog. His voice, rough with age but warm, drifted across the quiet. "Buddy," he said softly. "Is that really you?" Buddy turned, ears hightail, flicking once. The farmer nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "I thought so. You came back." He leaned against the fence, voice heavy but tender. "After you left, the old man waited. Every day he sat on that porch with his stick and his old coat, staring down this road, hoping you'd come bounding back. But you never came." The farmer swallowed, his voice breaking. 6 months later, one morning he didn't rise. His heart gave out. His son came back and buried him under the oak tree, the same one where you first met him. Buddy froze. His body quivered. A sharp whine slipped from his throat. Then he ran. He tore around the cabin, paws pounding the damp ground until the oak loomed before him, massive, ancient, its branches spread wide like arms. At its roots stood a simple wooden cross, weathered by rain, the soil dark and freshly tended. Buddy skidded to a stop. His breath hitched. Slowly he lowered himself to the earth, pressing his chest against the ground. His nose touched the dirt at the foot of the cross, and he let out a long, aching cry, the sound of grief and recognition. He stayed there motionless but for the shudder of his body. His tail flicked once, then fell still. Tears welled and slipped silently into his fur. He buried his muzzle deeper into the earth, as if trying to close the distance between himself and the man who had once given him kindness, warmth, and home. The village went on with its morning chores. The farmer moved on with his cow. But Buddy remained beneath the oak, as though guarding, as though apologizing, as though finally home. Above him, the leaves whispered in the wind. To Buddy it sounded like a voice, gentle, familiar, carried from somewhere beyond. And the stray who had wandered through storms, hunger, fire, and loss, curled into the grass and let the earth hold him. For the first time since those rough hands had stroked his fur, Buddy was not a leader, not a fighter, not a hero. He was simply a dog longing for the one who had loved him first. And beneath the oak tree his heart broke open, and in that breaking he was home. Morning light spread softly over the valley, a veil of mist drifting across the fields. The village was already stirring, women tending fires, men leading cattle, children chasing one another down the lane. Yet one presence was missing. Buddy. Inside the house, Mark was caught up in chatter with his girlfriend's family, laughter rising easily as plans filled the air. But Henry, older and quieter, noticed right away. If Buddy wasn't at the breakfast table, it meant he was somewhere that mattered. He stepped outside, calling a few children who had grown fond of the black-eyed dog the night before. They followed the dirt path behind the village, bare feet kicking dust. One boy sprinted ahead, waving, "I know this place, Buddy used to come here all the time." The path curved, and then it came into view. The old oak towering and still. At its roots lay the wooden cross, weathered by rain, and before it pressed low against the earth was Buddy. His head rested against the soil, body rising and falling with slow, heavy breaths. Henry stopped, the weight of the sight settling deep in his chest. He walked forward, knees stiff, and lowered himself beside the dog. His hand found Buddy's back, rough but gentle. "You came home," Henry murmured, "and if he could see you now, he'd be proud. No doubt about it." Buddy lifted his head. His eyes glistened. His tail gave the faintest wag. He stayed close, listening as if every word mattered. Henry drew a breath, his voice steady, but carrying farther, reaching even the children standing a few paces back. "Life doesn't end here, Buddy. The old man's gone, but Mark and that girl of his, they're starting something new. A wedding's coming, and you need to be there. That's the next chapter for them. And for you." The children gasped, faces lighting up. "A wedding? Really? We haven't had one here in years." Their laughter rang out bright and eager, chasing away the hush of the graveyard. Buddy lingered a moment longer. He pressed his nose gently into the earth, a final goodbye, then rose slowly to his paws. His tail wagged stronger now, sweeping back and forth like a banner. He looked once more at the oak, then turned to follow Henry and the children down the path. As they walked back toward the heart of the village, the air seemed lighter, charged with a joy that had not filled those streets in a long time. The children ran ahead, calling out the news, their voices carrying across the rooftops. And Buddy trotted beside them, ears high, eyes alive, his steps steady. He had honored the past. Now he was ready to walk into the celebration of a life still unfolding. The village had not seen such joy in years. By afternoon, the main street looked like a festival. Flags fluttered from fence posts, jars of wildflowers lined the churchyard, and laughter rolled across the valley. An old guitar played from a porch, its music weaving through the air. Neighbors arrived carrying their best dishes, platters of roast chicken, steaming cornbread and pies stacked high on long wooden tables. The smell of smoked brisket and apple cider filled the air, rich and comforting, the kind of food that made people linger and talk. Children darted everywhere, tossing petals and chasing each other between benches. The little town felt alive, like the Rockies themselves had decided to bless the day. And in the center of it all was Buddy. He trotted from group to group, tail wagging, eyes bright with joy. Children hugged his neck, farmers patted his back, and neighbors treated him as one of their own. On the far side of the square, the villagers had prepared something unusual, a table just for the dogs. Bowls of roasted scraps, biscuits, and chunks of ham waited set out with laughter and cheer. "Even the dogs deserve to celebrate," one woman said, wiping her apron. Buddy sniffed the feast, tail wagging. Then a young man grinned and placed a small wooden cup filled with sweet apple cider before him. "Come on, Buddy. First sip's on me." Buddy licked once, then again, ears twitching at the sharp taste. The crowd burst into laughter and applause. "He's one of us now," someone shouted. The other dogs joined in, barking and eating until the square rang with chaos and joy. One pup rolled in the hay, another tumbled onto its back paws, flailing. Buddy, warm and drowsy from the cider, curled into the grass tail, thumping lazily as if smiling at the scene around him. The people roared with laughter. Guitar music quickened, children squealed, and for one night the valley glowed with life. It wasn't just a wedding, it was proof that after storms and sorrow, laughter could return. And at the center, feasting at his own table, Buddy the stray, once lost in the forest, was the village's guest of honor. When the night faded, the joy did not. For 2 days afterward, people spoke of the wedding, children carried leftover ribbons, and men chuckled about how even the dogs had joined the feast. But for Mark, beneath the laughter, memories still stirred. At night, he dreamed of falling stone, of boulders thundering down the mountain, of Buddy's frantic barking in the dark. His heart was full, yet restless, as if the road still had more to show him. On the third morning, Mark asked Henry and Rocky to meet him at the edge of the fields. The sun rose over the Rockies, painting the ridges in gold. The air was cool, still damp with dew. Henry leaned against a fence post, arms folded. Rocky sat beside him, ears perked, tail brushing the grass. Mark paced once, then stopped, his hands restless at his sides. "I've been thinking," Mark began, voice heavy. "That landslide. It shook me. Every time I picture the road, I see rocks falling, waiting to crush us. I don't want to live with that fear." And more than that, his eyes drifted toward the house where smoke curled gently from the chimney. "I don't want to leave her alone. I want to stay. Work the land. Build something steady. A family. A life here." Henry's face softened. He gave a slow nod. "I figured you'd say that one day. The road's long and lonely, Mark. It takes more than it gives. You've found your place, and that's nothing to be ashamed of." Relief crossed Mark's face. "You mean it?" "I mean it," Henry said, his voice steady. "You've made the right choice. But the truck still has miles to run. And I'll keep running them." Mark dropped to one knee in front of Rocky, laying a hand on the dog's head. His voice trembled. "And you, Buddy, this village loves you. You'd have a yard children chasing you every day. You'd never be alone again. Will you stay here with me?" Rocky tilted his head, eyes deep and searching. For a long moment he leaned into Mark's handtail, swaying gently. But then slowly he turned toward Henry and sat at his side. His eyes held no rejection, only loyalty to the road that still called him. Mark's throat tightened. He cupped Rocky's face, pressing his forehead against the dog's. "Thank you, Buddy. For saving me, for standing by me, for being family. I'll never forget you." Rocky nuzzled him once, then pulled back, tail wagging, slow and sure like a farewell. Mark stood tall, blinking fast, and looked toward the house where his wife waited in the doorway, sunlight catching her hair. His voice steadied. "Go on then. The road needs you more than I do. Maybe one day it'll bring you back." Henry clapped Mark's shoulder, his grin faint but proud. "Take care of her. And when you think of us, think of open roads and mountains. We'll be out there." Together, Henry and Rocky turned toward the waiting truck. Morning light stretched their shadows long across the dirt road, man and dog bound by the miles ahead. Mark stood watching, his heart heavy but proud. Behind him the church bells chimed, calling the village awake. Ahead of him lay fields, family, and roots. Ahead of Rocky lay the horizon. And once more the black-eyed dog stepped forward, not toward ease, not toward rest, but toward the endless road, the journey that was still his to finish. The truck rumbled back onto the highway, its engine steady and low like a heartbeat, carrying them into the day. Behind them, the village shrank to a cluster of rooftops in the misty valley. Ahead, the mountains stretched wide and silver under the morning sun. Henry drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. He had no need for many words. The road itself spoke in the hum of tires and the steady rhythm of miles. Rocky sat tall on the passenger seat, paws braced on the dash, nose pressed to the cool glass. His breath fogged the window as rolling hills, pine forests, and the endless ribbon of asphalt slipped past. Every mile carried him farther from Mark, from the farm, from the life he could have stayed to build. For a moment his chest ached, but the feeling gave way to something stronger. His tail tapped against the seat. He wasn't sad. He was awake, alive. Henry glanced over, his voice quiet, almost like a prayer. "You and me now, buddy." Rocky turned his head, dark eyes locking with his, and wagged his tail harder as if to answer. They climbed higher ground. A hawk circled overhead, cattle grazed in gold fields, and the Rockies rose sharp against the sky. Rocky's heart pounded at the sight. Somewhere out there lay the truth. He still chased memories, mysteries, maybe even family. Henry shifted gears, the truck growling as it picked up speed. "Doesn't look like this journey's slowing down anytime soon," he murmured. Rocky gave a sharp bark, bursting with energy, then leaned forward again, nose pressed to the glass eyes fixed on the horizon. The cab grew warm with sunlight, the air alive with the promise of distance. Behind them, church bells had fallen silent. Ahead, the road bent and twisted, carrying them toward stories neither of them could yet imagine. And so they drove, man and dog, not bound by blood or home, but by something stronger: trust, survival, and the endless highway. Rocky lifted his head higher, tail, sweeping eyes bright as the light poured across the mountains. He was ready. The road was his now.